preferred the exit, he stirred up a hornet's nest.
I have come to the conclusion that the European Union is incapable of meaningful reform.
There were no tears in Downing Street.
Let's be honest, everybody knows that your position is changing week by week, and now you've got the cheek. Increasing numbers of people in the Labour Party at the conference this week are talking about a second referendum. So no second referendum.
Crystal clear.
Second referendum. Has anybody heard that? Crystal clear.
No second referendum.
Excellent.
Is it a clever plan? Does it really stick to the red lines that Theresa May set out?
I'm amazed Andrea's saying this. I mean, it clearly doesn't stick to the red lines. It isn't Brexit. It leaves supporters who are supporting Leave Means Leave are incandescent with rage.
We need to get on with it. The government needs to get a grip and accelerate the process.
Please welcome to the stage John Longworth and Richard Tice.
Hello, Bournemouth. Welcome, Brexiteers. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. It's our fourth in our Save the Brexit tour of the country. So you're very welcome here, and we're here to make a very big noise so that they can hear us in number 10. We have over 100,000 people watch these events live on live stream. So we want to send a very clear message to the country what we think about Brexit. I'm so glad to be here myself. It reminds me of great summer holidays as a child. Fantastic to be in Bournemouth. You know, I started my Brexit journey 40 years ago. I've always had, for my sins, connections with Brussels. Throughout my career, with its many twists and turns, however senior the role was that I held, I always was given the job of liaising with Brussels. So I always knew what they were up to. I know what game they were playing, and that's why in 2016 I chose to vote to leave the European Union. In that very same year, of course, I was also Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce. And I was so appalled at the lies of Project Fear, the things that the government was saying which were clearly untrue, that I felt I had to speak out. But in speaking out, my organisation came under tremendous pressure from Number 10. Number 10 went absolutely mad. And they put so much pressure on that I knew that the only thing I could do was to resign from the British Chambers in order to speak freely and campaign to leave the European Union, which is exactly what I did. And you know, on that ballot paper in 2016, there was absolutely no doubt that it did not say you've got a choice between remaining in the European Union or you can have a fudge deal, which keeps us partially in or wholly in. There was no doubt on that ballot paper that it didn't say you've got a choice between leaving the European Union and what the alternative is that we'll actually tell you a lie. The fact of the matter is, it said simply, you can leave the European Union, just leave, or you can remain. And people up and down the country tell me all the time, why haven't we just left? That's what we voted for. Well, I can tell you this. I'm proud to be British. I'm proud to be a Brexiteer, and I'm proud to be the chairman of Leave Means Leave. And we're going to carry on fighting until Number 10 actually believes that leave really does mean leave. Now, we've got some fantastic speakers for you tonight. But before we see the speakers, I want to introduce you to our Vice Chairman and the founder of Leave Means Leave, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Richard Tice.
Thank you, John. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's fantastic to see so many people here this evening. And we know why we're here, don't we? Because we are appalled, shocked, gutted by the weak, feeble negotiating tactics of our government and Number 10. We know that the Chequers proposal, or some minus variation of it, is the worst deal possible. It's actually worse, believe it or not, than staying in the European Union. That's how bad it is. We need to chuck Chequers. We need to put it in the bin. And we can still help this process. When I set up Leave Means Leave straight after the referendum, naively, I thought we might be needed for about 6 months or so, just to give a bit of encouragement to the government. Here we are, some 2 and a bit years later, and we've raised a load of money and we're relaunching the campaign. We've had 3 rallies so far, we've got more over the coming weeks. And the good news, the really great news, is the battle bus is back. You may have seen it outside. You can imagine the fun we had deciding what to write on the side of it. Now, you know, being a bit of an optimistic businessman, I wanted to put a very, very big number on. I wanted to put on it, save 39 billion. But actually, my colleagues, they just toned me down a bit, and I was outvoted, and I believe in democracy. Well, that's a good idea too. But we can still make a difference because we know, we have confidence in our great nation. All of us in business know that no deal is always better than a bad deal. And we have a very simple slogan that you may have seen on some of the banners. No deal, no problem. No deal, no problem. Unbelievably, just this afternoon, the Prime Minister of our country has just announced to the House of Commons that in the event of no deal, she'll have to take it back to the House of Commons to decide what to do. You couldn't make it up, ladies and gentlemen. But we can make a difference. You're going to hear from some great speakers this evening. We can make a difference. We can write to our MPs. We can turn up at their constituency surgeries. And we can tell them to chuck Chequers, believe in Britain, no deal, no problem. And they know that they can be outvoted. So I miss. Exactly. We've got to save the whole country, sir. You're so right. Now, of our great lineup of speakers, the first one is one of the country's greatest entrepreneurs. And it's interesting. The biggest entrepreneurs, the greatest entrepreneurs of this nation, the Dysons, the Bamfords, the Tim Martins of this world, they're all Brexiteers. And they all know that they're quite happy to trade under World Trade Organization rules. And our first speaker, a fantastic entrepreneur, he set up and created a chain of almost 1,000 pubs. An incredible achievement. He's given huge amounts of time and energy as a passionate Brexiteer. So much so, he gave a wonderful speech in Torquay on Saturday. But subsequently, I think the Ramonas might have poisoned him, sadly, because he's gone down with a hideous stomach bug. So Tim Martin is going to be with us by video as opposed to in person. He sends enormous apologies. He loves being with you. But here we have him on the video, just for a few minutes.
History books, I thought, well, it's obvious, isn't it? You need democracy in the world, and that's the only thing that can ensure the survival of humanity. Unfortunately, a lot of intellectual people, and this is at our highest universities and in the highest echelons of the land, don't quite believe that. Their instinct is it's better if things were run by people like us. And they've... So they've transferred gradually over the years a lot more and more power to Brussels, which is not democratic. It's got 5 unelected presidents. It's got a court which isn't subject to national parliamentary control, which isn't democratic. MEPs can't even initiate legislation. I'm afraid to say it's really a mock parliament. The government's tragedy, I think, in all this is that it hasn't prioritised leaving. What it's done is prioritised a deal, and that, of course, as any people, you don't have to be Warren Buffett or work for Goldman Sachs to know if you say, I must have a deal, that's my main priority, what's going to happen? Richard used the word, and shafted comes into mind. We don't need a deal, and the reason is that most people don't know it because it's invisible, but when you go into the shops, you're paying tariffs on 12,651 goods, including rice. Are the rice growers of the UK going to worry if we abolish those tariffs? Coffee, I haven't yet seen those on any Devon or Cornwall farms. Oranges, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. How sacrilegious is this? When you go to your fridge and have a glass in the evening, 4 or 5p is collected by the British taxman and sent to Brussels. And this is where the unscrupulous Remainers are trying to frighten the public. This is the core of Project Fear. What they're trying to say is food prices will go up if we leave the EU. You'll read that again and again. It's in the head of which the Consumer Association said that yesterday, reported in the Daily Mail, which used to be for us, but shockingly no longer is. What actually happens is we can abolish those tariffs, prices in the shops will go down, you will be better off and the public will be better off, but very unusually, the government won't lose any income. One of the things that's being said is we're going to have chaos at the borders and 50% of our trade's with the EU. I think Weatherspoons tried to call the bluff of the government and other people on this issue. We said, okay, what we'll do then is we won't buy anything from Europe. So we've switched from Courvoisier brandy to the number 2 in America, which is a very good brandy. It sells more than Courvoisier in America. That's good enough for me. I spoke to one of our customers in Birmingham the other day who happened to order it when I was standing beside him. And I said, do you like this E&J brandy as much as Courvoisier? He said, well, I think it tastes the same, but I like it a lot better because I can pronounce E&J. But there's massive opportunities out there. So the number 3 spirit in pubs in the UK now is one called Jägermeister. And again, I don't want to be horrid to our German suppliers who've been good suppliers, but we've switched from Jägermeister in the rolling Bavarian hills to Stryker from Chorley in Lancashire. Someone said to me the other day, are you going to lose? And there's no way of losing, because this is a quest for self-determination. People want control of their destiny, and they're going to do it. Thank you very much indeed.
He's absolutely fantastic, Tim. He's such a passionate Brexiteer, and he knows what we can do. He knows that we can buy great products from the United Kingdom or from the rest of the world outside the European Union. He's a real believer. For our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is from the DUP, who of course have a vital role to play in the current parliamentary process. He's been a Member of Parliament since 2005 for East Antrim. He's a fantastic, passionate Brexiteer, hugely, hugely influential. He's the spokesman for Brexit, for the DUP, and they really have a vital, vital role to play in the coming weeks. He's been hugely energetic. He's a man of great principle. He's a proper, no-nonsense politician. Before we welcome Samuel Wilson to the stage, let's just look at a video of him in action.
Can the Secretary of State give us an assurance that all parts of the United Kingdom will leave the EU on an equal basis?
We will be leaving the single market. We will be leaving the customs union. That is, of course, what people voted for.
And indeed, Mr. Speaker, it would be detrimental to the union if we had a situation where Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland had the right to say to the people of the whole of the United Kingdom, we don't care how you voted.
Don't take any dictation from the EU. Stand up to them, dig your feet in, and they will give in.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you. Can I thank you for that very warm welcome? We have those Union Jacks again. It makes me feel at home. And it's good to see you in such good form. Because, of course, if you believed the press, the people who voted to leave the EU are now defeated. They're downhearted. They wish they'd never voted the way they had. I have a few questions I want to put to you tonight. Are you sorry you voted the way you did? No! Are you sick and tired of those who told you that you didn't know what you were voting for?
Yes!
Do you want to still leave the EU?
Yes!
Do you want another referendum to have a rematch?
No!
That's the message that I wanted to hear tonight. In fact, you've done the speech for me. Because you see, from the minute that the referendum result was issued and was known, there were those who have benefited from EU patronage, who have been able to use EU lobbying for competitive advantage, for those who were able to get grants from the EU, albeit it was our own money back. They have been plotting and planning to overturn the referendum. They talk about being Democrats, but they don't care about democracy. Because, of course, the EU is not a democratic institution, so why would you expect those who support it to be democratic? And they've continued Project Fear. They've continued their tireless efforts to change people's minds. And then they came up with a cunning plan. It's so transparent that even Baldrick would have been ashamed of it. And the cunning plan involves Northern Ireland. And it runs something like this. The UK couldn't possibly leave the EU because you couldn't catch the taxes on goods that were sold and had customs duty to be paid when they crossed the Irish border. You couldn't have goods crossing the Irish border that didn't conform with EU regulations. And anyhow, if you did that, and if you tried to put the arrangements in place, you'd be back to war in Northern Ireland. You would be against the Belfast Agreement. These are people who didn't even know where Belfast was until they started making these arguments. We have a saying in Northern Ireland and in the Republic of Ireland that if you're going to tell a tall story, you've kissed the Blarney Stone. Well, I can tell you, Barnier and Leo Varadkar didn't just kiss the Blarney Stone, they made love to it when they made up with this one. And yet now, folks, and this is a serious issue which we now have. This is being used by the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom to either keep the whole of the United Kingdom under the bondage of Brussels, or else to break up the United Kingdom by cutting Northern Ireland adrift. And that was the choice which Barnier and co have given the Prime Minister, and she has fallen for it because she accepted their con trick. And I just want to, as a Northern Ireland MP, to spell out, first of all, the flaws in that. This idea of a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic that would have to be devised in order to capture the trade movements across the border. Who's going to put this hard border up? The government in London says they won't. The government in Dublin says they won't. And anyhow, if they had any knowledge of our past, they would know 50,000 troops, watchtowers, roads blowing up, electronic listening, constant patrolling couldn't close the border. They still brought guns across it, they still smuggled fuel across it, and they still smuggled cattle across it. I sometimes wonder, what are they going to do? Send for Donald Trump and tell him to get a wall up? But not only is it not possible, it is not necessary. Every day, currently, goods cross the Irish border, which require taxes to be collected on them, because there's different VAT rates and different excise rates. Guinness is made in Dublin and bottled in Belfast and then taken across to the rest of the United Kingdom. Is every Guinness lorry stopped? No. Is every van that carries the crates stopped? There's not one of them stopped, because there are means of collecting the tax which is to be collected. Now, I could bore you rigid tonight talking about trade facilitation. You would finish up glazed-eyed. In fact, you'd lose the will to live. You'd probably say, just stay in the EU if he keeps on talking like that. But with authorised economic operators, trusted trader, prior notification, all of this can be captured. And what happens at other entry points into the EU could happen along the Irish border. I passed Southampton on my way down here in the train. There were piles of containers, 10 stories high. And they were from Ling Ming shipping agencies, China shipping agencies, and a couple of other ones that I recognised. Does anybody think that some wee man in Southampton went and opened the doors of all those containers to see what was inside them? Less than 1% of the trade from the outside world that comes into the EU is actually checked. Now, why on earth, when we leave the EU, when we have the same regulations, when we have the history of having shared the same rules, why on earth would every containment and consignment of goods leaving the UK, whether it goes through Dover, Felixstowe, or across the Irish border, have to be stopped and checked? It's a con trick, and the sooner we see through it, the better. And I could go on about this, but let me just say where we are. And we don't wish to be in the eye of the storm. And I'll tell you something, this is not about macho politics either. Somebody from Channel 4 put it to me tonight that this was a game of who blinks first. Can I tell you, folks, the issues here are far too serious for this to be trivialized as a game of who can be most macho,
who will blink first. This is about the future integrity of this country. The flag which was being waved here tonight it symbolises the unity which was hard won historically over the centuries to make this country the 5th largest economic nation in the world and a country with influence. And we don't play with that. And secondly, it's also about our future. The future of those, your children, the future of generations to come. Whether or not we are free to have the economic ability to make our country rich, to make it great, to meet our needs, and not to be stifled by the dead hand of Brussels. And that's why in the Commons, and I don't care how much approbation it attaches to us, we will not be voting for any deal which keeps this country captive in any way to Brussels and to the EU. We will not be voting for any deal which calls into question the integrity of the United Kingdom or cuts Northern Ireland free. We voted to leave together, we will leave together, and that's the pledge which I make you tonight.
Isn't he amazing? I told you, ladies and gentlemen, that he was a man of principle, a man of strong beliefs, and he has just given it to us, full frontal, double-barreled, as it is. For our next speaker will be known to many of you because he's been the Member of Parliament for Bournemouth West since 2010. He's a long-standing Eurosceptic who's held a number of positions in government, most recently as the Parliamentary Private Secretary to Boris Johnson. And when Boris resigned, Conor also resigned so that he could speak out. Again, a politician of beliefs, of passion, and of strong views. We're very lucky to have him with us here tonight. Please welcome to the stage Conor Burns, MP.
Friends, good evening. It is a great pleasure to see so many of you here in this hall in my Bournemouth West constituency. Can I begin with an apology? You will have seen them outside. That small, bedraggled little group waving their placards, many of which posed a question. Is Brexit worth it, they said. My friends, let's give them the answer. Is Brexit worth it? Yes! And another reason I'm delighted to be with you tonight is that the alternative to being here was to have accepted an invitation to go to dinner in 10 Downing Street, to be told of the merits of the Chequers plan. My friends, I will take up that invitation in the coming days. But I want to go to number 10 after this meeting, and I want to take with me the message from you to number 10. Is it time to chuck Chequers? Yes! Now we gather tonight in a significant week. For this week, it is 46 years to the day since Her Majesty the Queen signed the Royal Assent of the European Communities Act 1972. I have lived for only 1 month of my life in an independent Britain. And I have watched, as I became politically aware, I have watched this institution evolve from what we were promised it would be, a common market for trade in goods and services, to a European economic community, to a European community, and then to the European Union we see today. And I remember the defining moment for me and Europe was the publication of the Maastricht Treaty when I was at university. And the opening sentence of Maastricht said that citizenship of the Union is hereby established. My friends, why on earth would you need to be a citizen of a trading organization? We know this was always about political union. We have watched this institution evolve to having its own flag, its anthem, a currency, a parliament, and embassies around the world, and now it aspires to have an army. This institution is incompatible with the character of Britain. My friends, when we gathered in this very building in the run-up to that referendum, I was here on the stage sharing it then with Nigel Farage, who you will hear from later. We had a very clear vision to put before the people of Britain. While the establishment threatened economic Armageddon, a flight of investment, massive unemployment, punishment budgets, we spoke to the hopes and ambitions of the British people. Now these same people queue up to tell us why the people voted the way they did. It appears today that it is the Remainers who know, in intimate detail, what motivated those who voted to leave. And they tell us they didn't understand what they were voting for. My friends, people knew exactly what they were voting for. They were voting in those three crucial words: to take back control. Control of our laws, control of our borders, control of our money, control of our trade policy. In short, they voted for Britain to become an independent, self-governing country again. The vote was, above all else, a massive vote of confidence in the British people, by the British people, and in the United Kingdom. And the yawning chasm that has now opened up in British politics is between the confidence of the public in themselves and in Britain and the paralyzing, craven cowardice of the political elite. Which leads me naturally to that grubby little compromise called Chequers. How far removed from the vision the Prime Minister set out at Lancaster House of leaving the single market and leaving the customs union. Month after month, I wrote to concerned constituents who asked me if we really believed it, if the Prime Minister really believed it, if Parliament would really deliver it. And month after month, I wrote back and reassured them that she believed it, Parliament believed it, and yes, we would do it. My friends, I had no idea then that the garden path to Lancaster House was quite so long. If this little document had a slogan, it should be "Not in Europe, but run by Europe." It doesn't look like Brexit, it doesn't sound like Brexit, and for a simple reason. It isn't Brexit. My friends, it is time to chuck it. The EU tell us they want to do a Canada plus trade deal. Let's embrace it. Chequers or no deal is a form of blackmail, and it simply isn't on. Night after night, members of Parliament trooped through the lobbies to give the public their vote in that referendum. We all promised to honour it. Quietly, determinedly, the British public delivered their verdict. Yet only this afternoon, the Prime Minister suggested in the House of Commons that in the event of no deal, Parliament would decide the way forward. My friends, a Parliament packed full of supporters of Remain, overturning the biggest democratic vote in our history, would have consequences almost impossible to comprehend. My message to the Prime Minister, in the words of one of her predecessors, is no, no, no. The choice put to us on that ballot paper in 2016 could not have been clearer. Leave or remain. We voted to leave. Leave must mean leave. My friends, let the message ring out loud and clear from this hall tonight. Let's get on with it.
Well done. Conor Burns, ladies and gentlemen, and we all know he definitely made the right choice this evening, coming here rather than enjoying something in number 10. Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, needs little introduction to any of us, but it's worth just reminding ourselves of what he has achieved over the last 25 or so years. Possibly the original, truest Brexiteer there is. He's battled for the cause, year after year, after decade after decade. Slowly but surely, he has changed the course of British political history. He will, without question, go down as one of the most influential figures in British politics in the last 70 years. He's demonstrated incredible courage in the face of abuse, vilification, and threats to his own security and that of his family. He's also encapsulated that courage when, unfortunately, he was in a hideous plane crash when he was battling away on an election day a number of years ago. It would have killed many people, but not our good friend. He dragged himself out of the plane, wiped away the blood from his head, from his eyes, dusted himself down, put his hand into his pocket, reached out a pack of cigarettes and lit a fag. As you'll hear in a moment, he's back on the trail. He's just warming up. Before we welcome him to the stage, let's just remind ourselves with a few clips of him in action.
It sounds as if you smell betrayal in the air.
The compromise that she put forward at Chequers last week, the PM's country home, frankly was a betrayal. I'm going to try and get the people to let their members of Parliament know they will not accept being betrayed.
And I tell you what, if I have to do this again, next time, no more Mr. Nice Guy.
We had a referendum. We voted for something. Our politicians should deliver this.
We have made our minds up in the greatest democratic exercise in the history of this country.
I trust the voice of the people more than the politicians.
Please welcome to the stage Nigel Farage.
Hello. Good evening, Bournemouth. I'm going to take issue with what the chairman said in his introduction. He said I was the first Eurosceptic. He's wrong. It was Henry VIII. He was the first Eurosceptic. You know, I'd like to say that it's a pleasure to be back on the platform with Sammy and with Connor, because we stood together and fought with each other in that historic referendum back in 2016. But the truth of it is, they thought they'd seen the last of me, because I was happy with that referendum result. We shouldn't even need to be here today if our politicians had done their job. You know, my day started off today. I got off the battle bus in Christchurch and I went round Christchurch Market. And I visited stallholders. I met some members of the public. And then it all went wrong. We found a pub. But I reminded myself that the first time I'd gone round Christchurch Market with leaflets was in the spring of 1994. I've spent nearly 25 years of my life fighting and battling to get this country out. Fighting and battling to get this country out of the European Union, because I believe in Britain and because I wanted my country back. That's why I did it. That's what I fought for. And what a day the 23rd of June 2016 was. A day when, despite everything, despite global leaders lining up to tell us not to make this terrible mistake. Remember, they even brought the American President Obama over to tell us we shouldn't vote to leave, and that awful pasty-faced man who was Chancellor Osborne threatening us with emergency budgets and 500,000 jobs would go. We were told it would be a disaster. We were told plagues of black locusts would descend on our land, and despite it all, we went out, and in the greatest democratic exercise in the history of this nation, we voted leave. And I can't help thinking that it needs to become a national bank holiday known as Independence Day. That'd make sense. The trouble is, things are not exactly going to plan. We have had a concerted, non-stop attempt by big banks, big business, and big politics, and they have campaigned literally every single day since that referendum to dilute it, to delay it, even to stop it. Every day we see Nick Clegg popping up. Tony Blair popping up. Well, I can't better that really, because he is pretty awful, isn't he? But Lord Adonis, yes. Alistair Campbell, how about him? I mean, every day we see this attempt, and now, Bob Geldof's back, God help us.
I thought we'd seen him off on the River Thames, but there we are. And now they tell us they want a people's vote. Well, let me tell you, we had the people's vote. It was in 2016 and we won. That's the end of it. And the mood out there in Christchurch Market and elsewhere where I've been, if they think that people who voted Brexit are somehow now disenchanted with the result, then I tell you what, politicians, you want to get out more. You want to go and meet real people, ordinary folk, where they live. We believe in Brexit. In fact, I think because of the sheer arrogance and bullying of Barnier and Juncker and all of them, I think we believe in leaving the European Union even more today than we did back then. I got to tell you, that was the day after the referendum. There was an emergency debate in the European Parliament. So I thought, well, I best show up, you know. Because I've worked quite hard over there. I've always tried to make positive and helpful contributions to their debates. And I turned up and I walked into the well of the Parliament, and there were about 100 cameras there. And there waiting for me was European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker. And he came up and he put an arm round me and he said, "Bastard." Which is probably why I did say to them on that morning, when I came here 17 years ago, I said to you I would lead a campaign to take the United Kingdom out of the European Union. And you laughed at me. Well, I said, you're not laughing now, are you? But I'm afraid the effect of lobbying, the effect of big business, the lure of jobs in Brussels has now had an effect upon the leaderships of our mainstream parties. We keep talking about the Conservative Party and its problems. We forget that 5 million people who voted for Brexit in 16 voted for the Labour Party in 2017. And I heard Sir Keir Starmer on the radio this morning, one of the rare times I listen now to the BBC. I find there are some commercial alternatives that are rather better, but anyway. And there was Starmer basically saying the Labour position now is Labour wants to stay in the customs union. Labour no longer has any desire for this country to be able to make its own trade deals. We'll have them done on our behalf by the European Union, and they retain the right to go for a second referendum. There are 5 million Labour voters who, as we speak, are literally being betrayed by the Labour Party. And it's time we told them how wrong that is. And as for our Prime Minister, well, I completely understand, Connor, why you resigned and why David Davis resigned, and I do understand why, for a brief period, people believed in her. Because she gave this big speech at Lancaster House. Even I thought, crikey, you know, we really have changed things. We really are going to win. She kept on saying, we will take back control of our laws, our money, our borders. She kept on telling us, Brexit means Brexit. But little did we know that not only is she a woman who is too weak to negotiate with the European Commission. I'd much rather we'd sent someone like Trump, personally, but... or anybody. Anyone that actually believed in Brexit. But I'm afraid she has also been deceitful and duplicitous. And I'm afraid that with every single week that gets worse, it gets worse and worse, doesn't it? Chequers was bad enough. Now it's Chequers minus. Now she actually wants to tie us in to a customs union until at least the end of 2021. And that, of course, means effectively until the next general election, when you could get a government that simply wants to keep us in. Brexit, Mrs. May, I'm afraid now, when she says it, she actually means remain. And that is nothing less than a betrayal of what the people of this country voted for. Frankly, I think if Brexit does get watered down to this extent, or indeed we're forced to have a second referendum, I think the damage this will do to the trust, faith and hope people have in democracy, in British government, in our way of life, will be incalculable. I really do. So I stood aside for about 18 months, wondering whether I should get back involved again. And I've decided, as I said in that video earlier, if I've got to do this again, then this time it's no more Mr. Nice Guy, okay? I've joined forces with Leave Means Leave. I've joined forces with a group of people who are here from business, who are not doing this out of their own personal political ambition, but because they believe in their country. And I'm sharing platforms with people from across the entire political spectrum, those from business and all parts of society. This campaign is not about left or right. This campaign is about right and wrong. This campaign is the most important campaign that has ever been fought in British history. This is not even about debating the merits of the issues. It's not even about discussing why we should have control of our borders, why we shouldn't give away vast sums of money, why we should be free to open up to the rest of the world, including particularly our own friends in the Commonwealth. All of those arguments have been had and been won. No, this campaign is about something more fundamental. This campaign is a matter of trust. This campaign is about Brexit being delivered. And that is all we're asking for in Leave Means Leave. We're simply asking our politicians to do what they promised. Every single leading player on both the Leave and the Remain side told us that a vote to leave meant we left the European Union, the single market and the customs union. Even that leaflet, do you remember Cameron's leaflet? The one that he spent £9 million of our money on, that he put through every letterbox in this country. And boy, how I enjoyed posting mine back through the letterbox of number 10. But that leaflet couldn't have been clearer. That leaflet said, however you vote, we will implement the result. We have been given a promise by our political class, and they are in the course right now of breaking it, and it's time for us to stand up and fight again. On your chairs. On your chairs, you will see the names, addresses, phone numbers and emails of all the members of Parliament for Dorset. Now, there are some rather good members of Parliament for Dorset, just as there are some good members of Parliament from the county of Antrim. But I'll tell you something, even those men and women who we know have got the courage within them to stand up and resist the pressure of the whips and everything else, even those MPs need to hear from you, because those MPs are going to need your support whilst they're put under massive pressure. But I'm more interested in those members of Parliament in Dorset, a county which, of course, did sensibly, being the beautiful place that it is, vote resolutely leave. But I want you to pressurise your members of Parliament. I don't want you writing them letters. Go and visit them at their surgeries. Queue round the block. Meet them face to face. Make them feel the heat. Make them understand that to sign us up to support being part of a customs union, being a vassal state that has its laws made somewhere else is unacceptable, and that if they do this, you will never give them your vote again. Make them feel the heat. We are in Leave Means Leave, reactivating the People's Army, that ground campaign that won us the referendum in 2016. And we're here not just for the short term. We will never go away until we get back the independence and self-government of our nation. I am completely and utterly committed to it. I hope that you are too. I believe that we are going to win. We are going to win. We are going to win. There is nothing they can say or do that will diminish our spirit. But now we need to come together, show our support, tell our MPs how they feel. We've beaten them once, and if it comes to it, folks, we'll beat them again. Does the air conditioning work in any of these buildings? Boiling, isn't it? Oh.
I did say to you, ladies and gentlemen, that he was back, and he has just absolutely proved it. He's just warming up, really.
I tell you what, open the doors, would you? I'm very warm.
And if we can get some air in here, that'd be great. Can we open some doors there, get a bit of air in here? Just before we move on to our final speaker, let's just remind ourselves, those who want a second referendum, they call it a people's vote. It's not a people's vote, it's a loser's vote. Now, Leave Means Leave is a campaign, it's cross-party, it's no party. And our final speaker is an amazing member of the Labour Party. He's faced, again, hideous pressure and abuse. During the referendum campaign, he campaigned tirelessly, day after day, speaking up and down the country. He's not only brave, he's an amazing speaker. We're very lucky to have him. He's a councillor from Ashford in Kent. Before we welcome him to the stage, let's just look at Brendan in action on the video.
I think a lot of voters, particularly Labour Leave voters, of which there are about 4 million in the country, will be very concerned.
Around this country now, fishing fleets have gone, fishing stocks are destroyed because of the common fisheries policy, a policy that sees our fish bought by European fishermen and sold back to us because we can't control our own waters. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? Kicking the poorest in the world in the teeth because they can't access European markets. That is an internationalist. And as a Labour person wants to be, because I want to see the poorest in the world raised out of poverty, I want us out so our aid means something.
Please welcome to the stage Brendan Chilton.
We've got a couple of doors open.
comrades. It is a real pleasure to be here. Can I begin by thanking the chairman and the fellow panellists and all of you for your commitment to this cause and to show number 10 and those cowards in Parliament that we're not going away, we're here till the end, and we are leaving the European Union. We all knew what we were voting for. Leaving the European Union meant leaving the political institutions. It meant ending the jurisdiction of the European courts. It meant leaving the single market, and it meant leaving the customs union. It also meant control of our borders. Very simple, very clear. We gave Parliament and the government a set of instructions. For God's sake, get on with it and deliver what we voted for. We did not vote for a customs union with the European Union. Why has the Prime Minister created a Department for Trade when she's essentially shutting it down by keeping us in a union which will prohibit us from making our own trade deals? She might as well sack Liam Fox now. What's the point in it? Better still, why doesn't he and all the other Brexiteers serve her a notice, resign and bring down this sham of a government? Or better still, let's have a general election, get those Remainers out and put people in that know how to govern this country. The customs union, I say this to my own party, a customs union is a notice to the poorest in the world that we don't care for them. Because what is the customs union? It's a barrier. It says to the poorest in the world, you cannot access our markets on free and equal terms. You have to pay a tariff. It says to the poorest in the world, you don't matter to us, so long as white, Western, privileged Europe is okay, that's fine with us. And for the Labour Party, my party, to be advocating saying in this union is a damnation of all we stand for and all we believe in. Because what we are saying is in all things, we want to give exclusivity to Europe. A job is better given to a German over a Sri Lankan. Trade is better with Poland than it is with South Africa. Rights matter more in France than they do in Guyana. No. We're an internationalist party, we're an internationalist nation, we're a democracy. The world matters to us, not just Europe. And if my party is true to what it believes in, it will ditch Sir Keir Starmer tomorrow and it'll go back to being a proper Eurosceptic party. Because he's very comfortable in Islington, very well-paid individual. Get out there into the towns of England that have suffered because of uncontrolled migration that has depreciated wages. Get out there into the country. Get out there into the country where our fishing fleets have collapsed because they can't compete with the common fisheries policy. Look at our public services, decimated because we're sending billions to Brussels every year. Why don't we invest and buy in Britain? Forget Brussels, we don't need them. If we have confidence in this country and in our people, we can do anything.
And let's just look for a moment at some of the policies that my party is advocating, whether you agree with them or whether you disagree with them. If you are elected into the high office of Prime Minister and the government of this country, you should have the right to implement your policies and then be judged at the ballot box afterwards. Half of the Labour manifesto of 2017 would be illegal if we stay in the single market and the customs union. You cannot use the power of the state to inject into industry and sectors of the economy to prop them up, to preserve and to generate jobs. You cannot bring the utilities and the railways back into public ownership because the single market requires competition at the heart of its membership. And you cannot have a fair and free immigration system open to the world. You have to give exclusivity to Europe. Why then are some in my party standing there saying, second referendum, stay in? If you don't want the Labour manifesto, if you don't want those policies, Lord Adonis, leave. We don't want you. %70 of Labour constituencies in this country voted to leave the European Union. And up to 5 million Labour voters supported leave. Sir Keir Starmer's continued place as Shadow Brexit Secretary places their support in peril. Jeremy should sack him today. And I would ask all of you today, as well as writing to your local MPs, write to Jeremy. Tell him, don't betray this country. Ignore the Remainers. Hold the government to account, but support Brexit and face tomorrow together as one country. And also, contact those Labour members of Parliament, like Kate Hoey, a great stalwart of the Labour Brexit movement, and Frank Field and Graham Stringer, and give them your support. Because there are many fronts in this Brexit campaign, but one of the most difficult and most challenging is winning the argument in the Labour and trade union movement. And that gallant band of small MPs who've supported Brexit all along, and others, such as Caroline Flint, who've come over, need our support. They are on the front line against the Remain infiltration of my party, and I ask you all, give them your solidarity, give them your support, and tell them you're with them in delivering Brexit for this country. And finally, most important of all, we must tell our students, our young people, that they are being sold a myth. They're being told, if we don't have a second referendum, if we stay in the European Union, if we don't stay, your right to travel will go. You won't be able to study. You won't be able to get a job. You'll have to pay roaming charges. They're being lied to by a corrupt and very well-funded Remain campaign. Tell your children, tell your grandchildren, the world is their oyster. They should be applying for jobs in Washington, to study in Hong Kong, to travel the world, and not be just concerned with a small group of nations in the European Union. That's something we must all do. Now, whether you vote Labour, Conservative, UKIP or any other party, whether you voted Leave or Remain, the divisions in our country now are not those argued in the referendum. They are between Democrats and anti-Democrats. And it is our job as the Democrats to protect our democracy, to support our politicians fighting in the Commons, to speak to our neighbours, to speak to our friends and tell them what is true. In full public view, our democracy is under threat. And what we need to do is remain focused on that goal of an independent Britain, trading with the world, free and enjoying good relations with Europe. And we have to fight on till the very end, so our country once again can stand tall in the councils of the world, in solidarity with all other peoples and all other nations. All we want is the privilege given to all nations to be free. Thank you. Cheers, Richard.
We're going to do a minute of Q&A.
Thank you, Brendan. Now, we have a few quick questions which we gathered while you were coming in tonight from the audience. So here goes. John from Guildford has asked a question which I'm going to put to Nigel. Why does the Prime Minister want Parliament to approve a no deal? They're all Remainers.
Well, I thought it was very clear that if there was no deal, we would just leave. That was the people understood that was the position. Now, I always thought that Parliament would try and battle to stop that happening. What we learned today is that the Prime Minister has invited them to do so. There is absolutely no prospect under Theresa May of us leaving on WTO terms. She will fight tooth and nail to stop it happening. In fact, I wouldn't even be surprised if we couldn't find some arrangement, though I guess we will. I wouldn't even be surprised if this Prime Minister didn't finish up backing a second referendum. We've got the wrong leader. We've got the wrong leader. You know, she's asked again and again. She's been asked again and again, do you believe in Brexit? She can't even answer the question. And what you saw today, I think, was her at her most deceitful, and the sooner they get rid of her and put somebody in that believes in it, the better.
Marion from Portsmouth wanted to ask Sammy a question. Will the DUP support the UK in not being tied to the customs union?
Yes, and I think that I've made that quite clear, that as far as we're concerned, there were two things that we wanted to see. First of all, that Northern Ireland would not be hived off in response to the demands from Barnier and from the Irish government. And secondly, that the vote which the people of the United Kingdom made collectively, that we should leave the EU, and if you stay in the customs union, you haven't left the EU, that should be honoured, and that we would work in Parliament, ally ourselves with those who wish to achieve that objective and seek to see it through.
So Michael from Poole wanted to ask Connor, will the Brexit MPs vote down the PM's current proposed deal in Parliament?
The answer to that is very straightforward. Directly, yes, we will. And it's important to say that this is above party politics. This goes to the very core of who we are as a democratic people. And that's why we're all here making common cause. I was in Parliament when we were arguing for the referendum. Nigel was outside Parliament putting very effective pressure on those of us inside Parliament, including David Cameron, to deliver that referendum. We were then incredibly clear with the public about what it meant. It meant leaving the customs union, leaving the single market, having the Supreme Court in London as the Supreme Court of our country. And if this Parliament delivers something that doesn't honour those fundamental, unfudgeable pledges, Parliament and our democracy will fall into contempt. And a final point. A final point on this. This so-called Chequers deal, and it's only a deal amongst those members of the Cabinet that didn't resign, it's not a deal at all. This Chequers proposal says that Parliament would have the right to change the rules and regulations in Britain, but it would promise never to exercise that right. Now, you would need to be a PhD in theology to think that that delivers on leaving the European Union. So yes, we will vote it down, but we still hope the Prime Minister will change her mind and go back to the vision she set out at Lancaster House.
Finally, a question for Brendan, a very quick question. Will Labour vote for a bad deal?
Well, Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party's policy is that they will keep all options on the table. But there are around 40 Labour MPs who have pledged themselves towards a second referendum. There are around 35 to 40 that have said they are opposed to a second referendum. Some of the statistics I gave on Labour constituencies will be weighing heavily on their minds. I think the Labour Party probably will not vote for Chequers.
So, ladies and gentlemen, our evening is coming to a close, but I would like you to do a number of things for me before we depart. First of all, I'd like you to show appreciation for the panel. For Nigel. Oh, for the panel. Enough. The second thing I would like you to do is promise me something. I want you to promise me that at the very least you will write to your MP. And, you know, the old-fashioned way, on pen and paper. I know this is remarkable in this day and age, but it's amazing what an effect it has on MPs if they get a big bag of mail. It makes them sit up and think. So please do that. One final thing, bearing in mind that we want to send a big message to number 10, and bearing in mind there is 100,000 people watching this on live stream, I would like you to stand up first of all and hold up your banners. Hold up your banners, whatever they say. Believe in Britain, leave means leave, say Brexit. Hold them up. Hold them up. And I want you to say after me, what do we want? Brexit. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Brexit. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Brexit. When do we want it? Now. Thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause. Safe journeys home.